welcome. My name is Chris. I am a bookseller at Boswell Book Company. If you don't know me, now you do. And I have a few things to tell you. We're really excited about tonight's event with Bill Buford in conversation. I'm here with Kyle Cherek. But first, a few notes from Boswell Book Company, and of course, a thank you to our co-host who's sitting right next to me. Don't worry, don't call the social distancing police. We live together. But this is Erin from the Alliance Francaise. And she'll say a few things too, but I want to welcome you. Today is day 4,191 that Boswell Book Company has been in business. Thanks, Kyle. Now, before I continue here, I do want to turn it over for a word from our co-sponsor, shall we say. Our co-host, our good friend at the Alliance Francaise, Erin Lewinauer.
And our directors here too, I see, Anne LaFlay. Waving. So I'm the marketing manager at the Alliance, and we have a school session that just started this September 14th. It'll run through December. If you want to sign up to learn French classes, we have them for all ages and levels. We also have short courses. One's coming up this Friday. It's cabaret if you want to sing in French, taught by one of our longtime teachers from Paris. We have a cocktail de bienvenue if you just want to come and see what we're about on Thursday the 24th at 5. And we have some upcoming authors as well next week. So it's all on our website, and that's the best place to contact us, the Alliance Francaise de Milwaukee. I'll keep it short.
All right, thanks, Erin. I'm so excited for this conversation here tonight with culinary historian Kyle Cherek, the former host and Emmy Award winner, former host of Wisconsin Foodie. We're going to welcome Bill Buford. He's author of course, of Heat, an amateur's adventures as kitchen slave, line cook, pasta maker, and apprentice to a Dante-quoting butcher in Tuscany. He's also author of the book Among the Thugs. He has had a storied career in letters. Buford's been the fiction editor for The New Yorker, editor of Granta Magazine, publisher of Granta Books, and many, many more things. And he's here tonight with his latest to chat about Dirt, Adventures in Lyon as a chef in training, father, and a sleuth looking for the secrets of French cooking. Kyle, Bill, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for coming to Milwaukee virtually. I'm delighted to sit down with you and many others.
Thank you, Kyle.
So we were talking just before this, before everyone was let into the room, but I was saying that I adored this book as a culinary historian. If you had written it just for me, that would have been fine. But you wrote it.
I did, Kyle. Actually,
yeah,
I did.
That was kind of you.
That and my sister.
Okay. Oh, good. That's why I assumed you mailed it directly to my house so I could read it. It was a little later after the publishing date, but that's okay. In any event, this book seems to be, to me, a story of how to get out of the way of yourself, or quite literally from the get-go, get out of the way of Michel Richard as he's getting onto a train. And then moving forward in this sort of Odyssey-like quest, all of the plans that you had, you were going to move to France for just 6 months. You were going to, not unlike Heat, where you would sort of follow another chef's storied career, and relationships with storied chefs would develop easily, and you'd get into the kitchens that you wanted to and that sort of thing. There seemed like there was a sense that this would just proceed along that track, but it was such a better book because it didn't. You've shaped a lot of stories in all the years with all the things that you've done, written, edited. Did you ever struggle with how to shape this huge, vast, and swaying story as it developed?
I hear people cackling in the background here. My wife, notably, in the kitchen. Difficulty? No. It was effortless. We were there for 5 years, and I think I wrapped up the book in a couple months. Really, it was like a frenzied dash. A friend of mine recalls a photograph I took just before Christmas 2016, where I'd finished the draft, and it was my first draft was like this high.
Yeah.
And it had a couple of years to go. I had so many stories. The challenge became folding them in together and figuring out how to tell each of them, and they all have their different pressures. And I mean, in the end, I was happy that I mainly got them there. My biggest challenge was just to represent this amazing, wonderful, exotic adventure that I had and my family had, where we arrived with 3-year-old twin toddlers who could barely speak English, and had just, like just very recently potty trained. And we left, and they were fluent French gentlemen who are to this day certifiedly fluent by the French government. And I'd become a cook, and my wife had become this personality in Lyon, and we fell in love with the city. And it was just a wild, wonderful adventure that went in all kinds of directions. And I was able to that was my challenge, was kind of get that adventure into a book. It wasn't so easy.
Well, you beautifully portray your family in this book through all of the struggles and all of the challenges. And there's, I mean, it's almost like to use a Catholic reference, like a Stations of the Cross, that you have like the next thing, the next hurdle, but it's your dream that you're pulling them along on. And there's several times in the book where you just say, did I ruin it for everybody? I mean, is this all wrong? And I guess where were those redemptive moments that happened for you that didn't make it in the book? You bring in and encapsulate, I think, really beautifully, so many wonderful family dynamics. And reading this book as a parent is a totally different way of reading this book as someone who hasn't raised children, for instance, because there's so many great insights. But there had to be moments where you just couldn't put it in the book, or it would have been too top heavy, where you really thought, oh God, what have I done? Or, ha, it worked out by the skin of my teeth, or, the stars aligned.
There was one episode that I cut. Well, there are many episodes I cut, but there's one quite powerful episode that I cut, which is, we got to a point where we were running out of money. Our children needed to get into an English-speaking school. We'd been in France for 4 years, and we came up with this idea at the last minute that we move to New York, back to New York, get them in a school, teach them how to read in English. But we couldn't quite let go of our apartment in Lyon, and it was all too quick. And we thought, well, we could be in 2 places at once. So we left, didn't say goodbye to anybody. And we came back 3 weeks later for the French school holiday, the Toussaint. And we arrived, all-night flight, got to our old home at about 3:30, 4 in the afternoon. And the boys were in the back, and they're getting really, really excited because they knew that school got out. They just went to a normal public school. The, what's it called again? Robert Douaneau, L'École de Robert Douaneau. And the boys rushed out of the car, rushed to the gates of the school, and they joined all the mothers that were waiting for their little children. And they all got so excited to see the boys and to see us. And they all started doing this amazing riff between themselves. Like, you're back. We knew you would come back. We knew you didn't like New York. We knew you liked Lyon better than New York. Look, little Lyon. And they called out to their children. They're here. They're here. They're here. And the gates opened, and the boys ran in, and the entire school surrounded the boys, chased them all around the schoolyard, screaming, until finally they jumped on top of them and just gave them this fantastic group pre-COVID hug. And the women were crying. They're crying, I knew you'd be back. I knew you knew how important Lyon was. And we're going, but we're not really back. But it was so moving. But I probably failed as a writer in that regard, because I wrote it up and my editors all went and went, well, yeah, it's okay, I guess, but no, not really. But for us, that was a big moment because we wanted to come back, and we were so close to the community that we had all these broken hearts that we'd left.
Yeah.
When we told them, actually, we're not back yet, they all just collapsed. And as a result, I invited everybody to dinner.
I mean,
That too was a catastrophe. That was called the night we called it the night the moms went wild, because mothers don't normally go out. They're in Lyon, yeah. So when they went out without their husbands and said, "Really, we can do that?" I said, "Come." We had our apartment was just full of all these mothers and their children, and they were going to ignore their children. They were going to drink. They weren't going to get home. They were like living large. And I was like running over and I was cooking the food and serving everybody drink. And the children were like throwing things out the window. And one of them was climbing out the window and sort of trying to hold these. And it became the night the moms went wild. But it was a wonderful celebration that expressed what we'd achieved by being there. In the end, 5 years of being a member of this community on many, many, many levels. And it was that?
What we were given.
What we were given.
Rather than we achieved it.
They gave it to us. I mean, the Lyonnais are very, very closed people, and they're very happy that the world doesn't know what they're like, and they hate Parisians. And they don't care that Parisians think they're buttoned up and closed and haughty. But boy, when you reach their heart, they just open up and embrace you. And it was very, very moving. It was a great culmination of our time and quite heartbreaking. And yes, I did cut it.
Well, I don't know. I would second guess your editor there. I would give him a stern talking to, because in your telling that is such a juicy scene and such a great point. And if the book had been an extra 8 pages long, I think it would have been just fine, if that's what the scene took or what have you.
It was probably 30. It's probably 50.
Okay. Well, all right, a little restraint perhaps then. So I'm glad that Jessica has been chiming in, because she is such an immense character in this book. And for all of you that have read it, you know that this entire story would not have happened if not for Jessica Green, who, I don't know if it's cricket, but Jessica, if you want to make an appearance at this.
Just come out of the shower. So she's got her wet hair look. Keep the apron on, because you've got that great picture of the boys on your apron.
But I want to, oh, terrific. I want to.
Forget it. It's the apron, because this is this is the day our boys ate ice cream for the first time in Canzado. They're strolling.
As the father to a 17-month-old, and my wife just joined this Zoom, I deeply respect that apron.
Oh, thank you.
It's profound. It was a profound moment. They'd never had ice cream. We tried to hold back sugar from them. They ate the ice cream and they went, "Oh my God, what do you mean?" It's Italian ice cream too. It's like, where's this been all my life?
All these short 36 months or 37 months or whatever it was.
It's true.
So I want to read, I want to have a meta moment. I'm going to quote you, Bill, quoting Jessica to both of you through the Zoom. But this is such a fantastic point in the book where you're in Lyon, you're situated, you've got your apartment, you've got, I don't remember at this point if you're cooking at Le Mère Brasier or not, but certainly you maybe made bread with Bob. And it's over a quiet dinner that you two are having after the boys are asleep. And she looks at you and says, no one who visits France knows it in a way that we are starting to understand Lyon. She said. She paused, taking the measure of the idea that was forming, wanting to articulate the relationship of food to what? To everything. People don't do what we do. She was excited. Her eyes glistened. I don't even know how to describe it. This, whatever it is, this place we find ourselves, the culture, our home, our place in it, it just seems very big. I mean, it's one of the most poignant, for me, moments in the book, almost that's a sort of apex, because it's this quietude in your couplehood that you have arrived in a way that the two of you never could have imagined on this journey. And it's got so much depth about your marriage, about the history of France, about cooking, about the path of your family, about that sort of thing. So I don't really have a question, but if you can react to that, and if there was more to that moment that you didn't put in the book, or what does that moment mean for you?
It was a very big moment. I'm very grateful that you spotted it and identified it. I think most people must have fallen asleep at that spot, because no one has ever mentioned that to me. But for us, it was huge. It was, we all think we know France, And we went from movies, from visits to Paris, to this and that, our French wine, French dishes, French restaurants. But we went to a place that, although it's a very major city, it's a private city and it's off the beaten track, and it wasn't a boutique city. It's becoming a boutique city. It was still run down. It had a lot that felt really that unchanged since World War II. There was a kind of grittiness in places that was like straight out of the Nazi occupation. And I hadn't seen anything like that since I lived in London and parts of East London that still showed, the bombings from the Germans, which has since been all cleaned up. But it had a rawness and a integrity and an intensity of living that we hadn't expected and that we couldn't have seen or had the privilege of it being shared with us unless we were there for the long haul and giving it time and going deep. And our children were in the school there, and Jessica was already on a parent board. And it was beautiful, beautiful moment. And we felt very, very far away from New York and very happy to be very far away from New York. We felt we were in a place that visitors don't see, but we were getting close, and we'd end up getting closer to what is the heart of a really, by our standards in our life, a foreign place. It was foreign, and it was becoming familiar in very intimate ways. It was a really profound moment.
Especially after the hard stuff.
Yeah, especially after the hard stuff, because getting there was hard. Hard. Getting there was really.
Making it work.
Getting there was really hard on just about every level.
Well, I don't know either of you, but I want to say I'm so pleased that you're still married after having read the book. Because
That's a very, very loud cackle. That's possible that my Zoom microphone didn't capture, except I think that's Jessica's way of saying she too is very surprised.
No,
I'm not surprised. It's told wonderfully through the book, and from your perspective, because it's the one you have, but in an unscathing, very self-deprecating way. When you describe the parenting Iditarod that she went through when you were just cooking for Michelle during the week, and the toddlers were, crawling out of the crib and opening up the refrigerator and things like that. And then the time away as you were invested in the kitchens, what you went to France to do. And that's part of another question is, cooking is, and this has been said many times, a young person's game. I think you point out in the book, or you have in other places, the grand chefs are like gymnasts or a ballet dancer, where you sort of really get into it at 14, and then by your 20s, you've got the rigor and the strength and the hours and the time and the stamina and and you.
14 is regarded actually as kind of pushing it. I guess Daniel Blue,
yeah.
he might have started at 13. But you definitely have to be starting at 14. And part of the reason it's just because your brain is so unencumbered, you don't have the other burdens, you've got a great capacity to learn, and you get just a precision of habit and thinking that it's very hard to get when you arrive in the kitchen 4 decades later.
I was going to say, you did it in your 50s, and I know you were just there as a sponge and for this experience, but you were at Le Maison Brasier for something like 6 months. And one of the things that I think you and I both love about chefs and cooking is that you can't fake it. If you say you're here and you're actually here, everyone in the kitchen knows within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's very few careers left where that's maybe a cobbler or someone who welds or, tool and die maker. The crafts essentially, right?
Yeah.
But you were doing it as I'm 50. I wouldn't do it. So my question is, how did you do it and then come home to a family and retain all of this and make notes about the book and then come back and write it all out, as you said, in a couple of months? That's
I
extraordinary.
did not write it down in a couple of months.
That was
That was my joke. No, it took longer than I want to acknowledge. Put it that way. Well, I was there. I mean, on the one hand, I was there in a dual capacity because I was there to go through the experience in a primary way, but I was also always there as a writer, even though I stopped being treated as a writer. One of the benefits of the place I went to was that it was a grand restaurant that was tight on funds, and they just opened up. They instantly got 2 Michelin stars. They were under a lot of financial pressure. They didn't want to hire more people, and I became free labor. And not only that, but I became pretty competent labor. And by the end, I actually became like exceptionally competent behavior. And it's your thing. It's like no one's hiding anything. And so when you do achieve competence, and for me, I was cooking a staff meal, and the Friday staff meal, because it's only open Monday to Friday, Friday staff meal was all leftovers. And leftovers was just all, you start with an idea, and then people come up with other things, and then they want to clean out all the goodies that they've been saving for the last day. And it's this frenzied thing where you're cooking 20 dishes at once for everybody, like really, 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 really fast. And I got to be trusted to such an extent that people just gave me stuff. They go, cook me this, cook me this, cook me this, cook me this. And I thought, all right, I'm buzzing, I'm fast, I'm good at this. I can take anything they give me. They recognize that I'm a cook. And it was really the privilege of being in a place where it turned out that I was needed, which is not what, you get journalists who get embedded in activities, but you rarely get it to where the journalists can cross over to the other side.
Yeah.
And that was a lucky thing for me.
Another aspect of this book that I love, and I think it was partially in how you shaped it, but it's this lovely story of loaves and fishes, right? Because the first gig you can actually get, because everyone turns you down. You get to Lyon, you can't get hired as a chef, but you went there to get hired as a chef to write this book, is with Bob Baker, who turns out to be exceptional, right? Best bread in Lyon, across the street from your apartment.
Yes.
And there's the loaves, and then when you get into the Institut de Bocuse, the fish, I mean, that's the course that you just, I mean, you nearly had a breakdown as a result of wanting to pass this because it was such a tactician that you respected.
This was the course taught by a food maniac.
Right, you have the great line that he was ruined by food.
Yeah, ruined by food. He's like, a fellow teacher said, he's been ruined by food. He was a complete maniac. And the course was really long days, and the objective was to teach all the fish in the sea and every French preparation for it. And it began at 8 and ended at 7 on the first day, but each day got longer and longer and earlier and earlier and longer and longer and earlier, till I once took a bathroom break and I got rebuked for slipping out of the classroom to go pee. And in the course of it, I missed one of the dishes that was going to be on the exam, but it was so fanatical and so extreme. But yeah, loaves and fishes. You're coming to this with the Stations of the Cross. You're coming to this with a certain religious approach.
I don't, which is funny because I don't have that. It's just the metaphor that grabbed me in that. Because out of those two, I guess I was trying to get at was the abundance of the rest of the story. If you hadn't had that base in baking with Bob, and him taking you to all these underbelly restaurants and fine restaurants and things like that, he really was this, uninaugurated tour guide for you to introduce you to the rest of Lyon. And then I can't remember the instructor relative to the fish, but he introduced you to the rigor, it seems to me, that then you'd encounter in all the other great French kitchens.
Yeah.
And I think you say in the book that, if Italian cooking is about joy, then I'd love for you to complete that sentence, because I'm not still sure what you would say French cooking is about.
High pleasure.
Pleasure?
High pleasure.
High pleasure. Okay.
I mean, it's both are about culture and both express either Italianness or Frenchness. Both actually celebrate ingredients, and they're like cousins, really. But French cooking at almost every level, beginning with Bob's Bread and to a meal at Paul Bocuse, is about just maximizing high pleasure on the plate and at the table. And there's something very beautiful about a simple bread that's better than any other bread you've had. And the dishes don't have to be very ambitious, but there's something unifying all of them, and there's a great belief in the value of high pleasure. And there's a great belief in meals and how you stop to have your meals. And everybody, it may have changed by now, but everybody in Lyon stopped. I mean, it was if the store was open continuous, as they called it, your assumption was, oh, it's open, every day, or it's open all night, or, we came from New York, so it's going to be open on Sundays. That just meant that they were open during the lunchtime. And very few of them were open at lunchtime, because the practice was everybody stopped at lunchtime. So in fact, he is putting in our furniture. This was Jessica's doing, because I wasn't there for putting into the furniture. When it's lunchtime, they stop and they take a break. Or when I used to go out cycling, because that was when there was the least traffic, and you'd see sales reps pull out their car, put a little tablecloth on the windscreen of their vehicle, open the door, and have their lunch. And there's a great belief in mealtime that seems it's good for the soul, it's good for family, it's good for companionship, it's good for a break, and it's wonderful. And high pleasure is an expresses itself in those values. The Italians are not that different, to be fair, but the French are typically more extreme.
More rigorous about it.
Rigorous and extreme.
Yeah. So to follow up on that, you once said, relative to heat, I looked at some of the things that you've done and spoken about, which is a gorgeous book, by the way, wonderful book. You once said a very crucial Italian philosophy when creating a dish is to take 3 ingredients out. So what then would be a very crucial French philosophy, now that you've cooked in some of the grand kitchens in one of the most esteemed gastronomic capitals in the world? And
yeah, I think the Italian idea was your dish consists of 3 ingredients, and then at the last minute you take one out. The French don't have that approach, but what's quite probably different ways of thinking about it, but I think French cuisine, more than Italian cooking, really strives for the most beautiful expression of an ingredient. And that will involve tricks of concentration and selection and preparation. And the ideal dish, whatever it is the highest expression of that food. French food also has another thing, though, which is that it does have a very established orthodoxy. And even though it's Nouvelle Cuisine and everyone's done all these modern things, there's an orthodoxy which has been pretty carefully inculcated for 4 centuries. And so when you're cooking in France, there's all the things that you know what to do with turnips or celeriac or duck or chicken. And you're engaging in a kind of dialogue with the past, which is wonderful. And it's very deep part of French culture, is that you know what to do with your food and you know to recognize the food you've been given. Italian's got something very similar, but the French is just much more codified.
Yeah.
When the French discovered that they could eat potatoes around the time of the French Revolution, they just didn't say, okay, we'll have potatoes. They came up with 100 ways to make potatoes. And they did this, they did this in about 10 years, in a lifespan, 100 ways. And then once they did that, they thought, well, eggs, damn, there's at least 100 ways to make eggs. And so you have 100 ways to make eggs. And each of the 100 ways to make potatoes, maybe you don't want to do all of them, but they're really, really good ways of making potatoes.
So in that, well, here's a bit of a pivot. So Heat begins with a dinner party and a guest that you invite, and that chef and that trajectory, it's this big celebratory kind of, you know. In Dirt, we don't really have that conviviality of the table much at all in the book until, I mean, there's that lovely scene where you're, the moment when you're invited out into the farm, you and Jessica and the kids, and you're eating the charcuterie and walking through the field, and you think maybe this is our bucolic moment, and then it gets a little bit more challenging as life does. But it really doesn't hit until near the end of the book when these other Leonese chefs foist themselves upon you and Jessica and say, you're going to make pasta for us and you're going to teach us. And then you have that conviviality of the table moment. How different was this experience for you? Because Heat is full of that celebration of food. Dirt is still a celebration, but it's such there's a striving that's going on. And were you always hoping to get to that conviviality moment, or were you just, well, this is how this, you know, it's more of a struggle this time?
My wife has an intervention.
That was actually a question for Jessica, but.
Remember the book about Lyon that you made me read?
Yeah.
He says, you rarely get a dinner invitation in Lyon. Actually, you never do.
That's right. Because I quoted this sort of by this very controversial figure, which is the title of the book is you don't know my Lyon.
Yeah.
My Lyon. And one of his statements is, what does it say?
You rarely get a dinner invitation.
Yeah, that's right. You rarely get a dinner invitation in Lyon. Correction. You never get one. I don't think we realized that we were missing anything until we were invited to learn it.
Your French teacher.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think we realized that there was this whole culture that was trusting and intimate. You know, Italian, you know, well, he kind of describes that wonderful, almost undiscriminating, joyful embrace that you get from Italians. Just like if you go to Italy, if you can speak Italian, they'll love you because you're going to speak their language, and it's a very welcoming culture, and it's a very welcoming cuisine. It's not intimidating. It's all about sharing big platters of food.
Yeah.
What we didn't realize in Lyon is that if someone invites you into their home, it's there's nothing casual about it. It's joyful. It's liberating, but in a way it's for life. So when these people came over, these wonderful women who ran Bouchon des Filles, and they said, Bill, you're going to cook us pasta. What they were saying is, you're going to invite us into your home and kind of prove your commitment to us and to Lyon. And we did. And since then, we have been going to their home every time we go to Lyon. And if we skip Lyon, like we did last summer, because we had a very truncated summer, and we did this summer, of course, well, they're pretty indignant, actually. Like, what do you mean? I mean, what, you just didn't have time to go to Lyon? You managed to go to Italy, but you didn't have time to go to Lyon? Uh-huh. And you think that's okay with us? Well, it's not. It's for
All day, too.
Yeah, our meals they're not casual meals. I mean, you show up at noon, and you're lucky if you can, you know, you're home by 9 or 10 in the evening, and everybody's cooking, and the meals are very elaborate, and the elaboration isn't fancy. It's a commitment to the table and to you as the guest. It's we didn't know that existed until we discovered it, and then we discovered that we have friends for life there because of dinner.
Because of dinner. Well, it's what brings, I mean, it's the oldest and most essential energy that brings human beings together.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So you have this wonderful scene earlier in the book where you're invited to make blood sausage.
Yes.
And I know that you were aware of the first and other most famous scene of writing about making blood sausage from Émile Zola's the belly of Paris?
I don't actually.
Oh my God. Okay.
Straight away, I've got all my pockets of ignorance, as we showed before, and
Okay.
one of my modus operandi is that I go into these things blindly, openly admitting my ignorance.
Okay, because it's one of the, I mean, so it's a food book that I've read, and your depiction is gorgeous, and actually brought me to tears, and honoring the animal and the descriptions. But
Famous book. I know it's a famous book. I just haven't.
Yeah, the Bill is channeling and challenging this great scene right now. So you have just driven me into an interviewer's cul-de-sac for my next question. So we're just going to leave that question until you read Zola, and then you can call me and we'll talk about that separately. My other question is, you've got, in this book, you've got food history about whether, you know, the French really got their food from the Italians and Catherine de' Medici. You've got your family story. You've got your path and learning and trying to create acumen as a chef. You've got all of this being accepted by the culture, all these different characters. How did you figure out how to weave all that? There had to be times where that yarn just got so tangled.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I probably did too much, but I kept thinking of the great journalist, late journalist Michael Hare, who's a friend of mine, who spent 6 weeks in Vietnam, and it was a horrific experience, but it was a huge experience. And then it took him years to write it, because his difficulty was trying to get on the page something that allows the reader to share the experience that he had. Right. And his wife Valerie told me how when he finally did a page that he liked, she put it on the wall and taped it. And then we got a second one, and she put it on the wall and taped it. Right, you got 2 pages, until finally the book was completed. But when their apartment was completely covered with pages.
Wow.
And I'd write stuff, and one of the things I learned is that each thing that I was trying to convey needed maybe a different way of telling, but I was just trying to capture the enormity and excitement of what was just a life-changing, huge adventure for me, my wife, and my family, and the friends we were able to make there in this city that very few people get to know, in a culinary culture which is not modern, but is still, you know, up to date. And I found it very hard to do. Yeah. I put in a lot of things that make the book more challenging probably than it needs to be, but some of that was like, I really believed that there was a connection between Italian and French cooking, and that would tell us something about French cooking and tell us something about Italian cooking. And to my satisfaction, I got that, but it took, you know, there's a lot that was surplus to the essential story, whatever that story was.
Yeah.
My wife, cheers. I think this is a blind tasting.
I can tell you what you want if you want.
For those of you that haven't read the book, Jessica Green is a really accomplished wine expert, and so whatever Bill's drinking probably doesn't suck.
It's a Riesling, which is sort of not entirely appropriate, but it's delicious.
Sorry.
It's really is good.
Yeah. It's an Austrian Riesling.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So you, in this book, there's this really subtle leitmotif of what I would call imposter syndrome, as you're sort of moving through all these waves of, you know, I'm the New Yorker editor, and I wrote a book about Italian cooking, and it's translated in French, and here I present it to you, and would you please give me a job, or could I have entry, or could I, you know, stage here, or Bob, take a chance, or that sort of thing. And I know it wasn't just one, you know, epiphanic moment, but what were the moments when that disappeared, that you didn't quite put it in the book? Because you never really named that. But I know that you finally settled, all of you settled in different ways. But you're the teller of this story.
It changed profoundly by my going and being this improvised student at the Institut Paul Bocuse, where I arranged a course where normally the coursework is half cooking, half theory. And I didn't do the theory. I probably didn't have the French for the theory anyways, but I did the cooking. And I would take courses at all levels just so that I was cooking every week or just about every other week. And I came out of it with a proficiency, which meant that when I went to La Mère Brasier, I didn't come with my book about Italian cooking, which I did the first time I met the owner of La Mère Brasier, Mathieu Viennet. I gave him my book and he looked at it and he looked at me and I was saying, maybe I'd like to do a stage with you. And he looked at my book and he looked at me and, maybe I could work with you.
Right.
And then he just said, Italian cooking. Right. And that was it. After Institut Bocuse, I went and saw him again and I said, just give me like a couple weeks. And and he said, we all respect the Institut Bocuse.
Yeah.
But we respect the Institut Bocuse. And he gave me 2 weeks. And then after a month, he said, you can stay longer if you want. You can stay as long as you want. And then after a month or two, he said, I wasn't allowed to leave to go home to see my wife. I was a member of the staff. And then after that, I said, I want to cook on the line. And he went, oof. But, I did it. And then once you've gone through that, I was about to do some stuff with Alain Ducasse. There's a great restaurant he has in Monte Carlo. What's it called? The Hotel de Paris.
That sounds right.
And I got that set up because that's a great restaurant. Great restaurant.
He's a great chef.
One of the great chefs of France and
Yeah.
Ducasse, Alain Ducasse. But that would mean me then living in Monte Carlo and that'd be like the whole commute thing again. And I didn't, but at that point I was able to do that.
Thomas Houck just says it's Louis the 15th is the name of the restaurant.
Okay, all right, thank you. Merci.
Yeah.
But I'd done that because I'd established, these were important milestones of establishing my cred, and my being in the New Yorker didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
And people got confused and they thought it was the New York Times anyways. And my, writing about Italian cooking was like really had nothing to do with it because that counts not at all. It was by getting in and learning the French skills.
Right.
Great skills.
And then cooking for the French people, they were super impressed with it.
And then cooking for the French people.
Including the making personnel.
Yeah. Jessica's pointing out, when I'm making the staff meal, the personnel, that was the big.
That's
That
really,
was the big.
that's on the arm, cooking the staff meal
That's
is
true.
that's a big deal. That's street cred. Yeah.
That's genuine.
Yeah. So I'll just one or two more questions, then we'll open up for folks that are in the chat asking questions. There's this history, or there's this history of books of either English or American writers going to France and writing about that experience and then coming back. Provence and Duck Season, most recently by David McInich and others. And
Yeah, that's good.
it's a great book. Yeah, we did this interview only live when he came through. He's a terrific guy. It's a great book. Were those echoing in your head as you prepared for this project, or was it sort of, when a great musician sets out to do the album they want to do, and they just pack all of they don't listen to anything else for a while, right? They just go out and work on the groove that moved them.
Well, for a start, it's Duck Season? Is that what that's
Duck Season, yeah, David's book.
Yeah, and I was working on this so long that I started it long before he started researching his, and I was still researching mine when he probably finished his book. But I have to say I was probably nervous. I wasn't aware of Americans who had done what I was doing, and there probably are Americans who did what I was doing. And if there were, I certainly made a point of not wanting to find out about them. I do know, and this is an indication of how long ago this book started, that when Jessica and I got a chance to see a premiere of, what's it called? Julie and Julia?
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
The Julia Child,
Mhm.
yeah.
Julie and Julia, yeah.
Yeah, by Nora.
Nora Ephron did the film.
Yeah, Nora Ephron. I was watching it, and at that time, I was in the kitchen, and I'm thinking, wow. I mean, she's great. Julia Child is great. And she's an inspiration, not only to Americans, but to French people. And her portrait is on the Paul Bocuse Avenue of Great Chefs outside the restaurant. But I thought, oh man, she had it so easy. And it wasn't like, I wasn't even, there wasn't bravado. It was just like,
Yeah.
man, I'm going through, I'm getting beaten up. And
You were never home.
and as Jessica saying,
I don't know,
was never home.
that 8 years of letters back and forth between she and Lizette were pretty brutal if you read those letters.
I love her letters, and
Yeah.
I love her letters. I love her. And it wasn't pretty, but I looking at it in the film, which is it's a narrative and all that.
Right, right.
She had a very nice apartment.
It's true. We went through. It was just. I thought I was getting just a lot of authentic experience, and my challenge was to live it, survive it, come out at the top end if I could, and write about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were several moments when I didn't think I would come out at the top end, and I thought, damn, do we just go home and I write about how good Italy is? I didn't. I mean, it wasn't.
Right.
Wasn't so easy. I mean, some people thought, I had all these.
Cursed at you and you came home and you're like, they swear at me.
Oh, that's right. Jessica said she remembers that when I come home to say, when it goes getting difficult to say, everybody swears at me all day. It's like, it was just like, it was, and one of our local bistro chefs said, tell people to come work for us. We're nice to people. But for a writer, as long as it does in the end work,
Right.
you're in the spot you want to be.
You endure it. Yeah. Yeah. So in closing, you've got these two wonderful books, one on Italian, another on French, painting in broad strokes. If you're going to complete the trilogy, it seems to me, and I'm interviewing you, so I get to pose this, you're either the next one will be called Foam, because you go into molecular, right? You spend some time at Noma and then in the Basque region with those folks, or Curb, because you go deep into street food and the things that we just aren't aware of yet. The point of my question is, do you have a what's next for the next thing that you're interested or that might be bubbling up or that you see in this grand arc of the stories of food it's calling from you that you want to tell?
I should make something up to answer the question satisfactorily. Yes. Well, we're in fact spending
You can take my ideas. I
next
think
year in Spain. No, yeah, Austria. No, maybe Austria. No, yeah, fish. We're going fishing. Farming with Magnus Nielsen. Farming. Yeah, farming. Or onions.
No,
Fish,
farming.
yeah. Actually, in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of French stuff because I have an expertise, and it's a deep kitchen culture. It's going to take a long time to learn it. And I'm trying to do these, I'm not doing them as regularly as I'd like to, but I'm doing these New Yorker online columns about dishes.
Mm-hmm.
But the real virtue of them, nobody seems to read the pieces that I can tell. But I had the idea that we could make, in this quarantine period where you can't get a cameraman into your apartment, that I can make videos with my sons.
Oh, they're wonderful. I showed one to my wife, the one of, I think it's Frederick is filming and George is directing. And also,
Other way around, but George is
other way around, yeah, all right. So George is
trying to get the person you probably see too
directing,
much of.
and also rising up from behind the counter and, prompting you to smile and dance. And I mean, it's a great little omelet that you make. Yeah.
And that was the first one we did.
And in cooking videos, it's a lot better than a lot of the other dross out there, quite frankly.
That's what the boys think. They have high opinions about this. But it's that's what I'm doing right now, and I want to be doing them more regularly. And they're getting paid now, so they really want me to do more regularly. And in fact, if I don't deliver a piece every week, they say, I think you should be paying us for the money that we're losing, because they get a fee from Condé Nast and the New Yorker for their contribution, and that's keeping us busy. And I'm probably, I mean, in the short term, I'm going to be doing more stuff with French cooking. Partly because I don't want to lose it. I want to keep myself in it, and it's a beautiful discipline. That wasn't the right answer. Yeah, we're gonna do curb food in Austria.
Yeah. Okay. I still think foam and go into molecular gastronomy just because I'd love to hear your take on it. But you know, that's something that I'll convince you of later.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's open up the chat to any questions that we have. Let's see. This one is. This is really more of an observation, but I think it'd be great for you to respond. Interesting that you called French cuisine, but Italian cooking. And that's from Catherine Plum.
Well, the time be cucina. Cucina italiana.
Which is also cooking and
Yeah. Very good point. And I think implicit in that is a difference of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And the attitude is also comes from the Italians. I mean, when you look into the history, which you would appreciate, is Italian cooking in the Renaissance was definitely a cuisine. I mean, it had an orthodoxy, it had ambition, it was flamboyant, it was flash. But with the kind of the end of the Renaissance, Italian cooking became, especially by the 19th century, rather beautifully rustic, with a lot of pride in local dishes, a lot of pride in simple dishes, and very accessible. And I think most of that food Italians would describe as cooking. It was what you make for lunch, what you make for Sundays, what you make for your family. You have that in France too. And the home cooking in France is a great area to explore. And when we were living where we were living in our apartment in the summertime, you could smell all the kitchens around us cooking food. And if you went up the stairs around lunchtime, it was killer, especially if you were hungry, because everybody was making food at home. And the fact they made food at home is what gave the restaurant such importance to people, because that was like your night off. That was a night when you didn't have to make the food or clean up afterwards, and you could be served and you would eat as much as you wanted to eat. But the French cooking has there is a codified cuisine. And Jessica's objecting.
No, I'm just gonna say in terms of grammar, cuisine in French means both the cooking and the kitchen, right? It's la cuisine. And in Italy, cucina is both the kitchen and the cooking. So kitchen, it's really kitchen.
Could you hear that?
No, if you could repeat it, but I just have to let everyone know before you do that Jessica just chimed in with French etymology, and her fluency in French is one of the reasons why Bill was successful in this book. And the book, if you took all of the other parts out about the food and only, which I will be doing, reading aloud the sections, my wife speaks French as well, where Jessica essentially has French smackdowns with the officials, be it principals or others.
People on the bus or people in a queue or especially.
And in her own quiet way, just keeps the whole endeavor going.
In a restaurant when she said, you know, and you're obviously a foreigner because in this country, normally the woman doesn't pour the wine at the table. And she goes berserk, and he's this big old guy with a big chest, and by the end he's tiny little man. His wife takes him out and feeds him some water outside.
Some fresh air. Yeah. So anyway, the point was, I don't remember exactly, we couldn't hear perfectly, but something was what cuisine means in French, or what it translates rather.
Well, Jessica's point is that cuisine means kitchen. So it does actually mean kitchen, and it also means the culture of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the same as in Italy, it's cucina. So it's, the words are loaded, but I think cuisine is more loaded in French than cucina is in Italian.
Right. So Elizabeth asked, what's your favorite regional American cuisine or cucina or cooking? And maybe something you'd like to explore more. You've already written beautifully about oysters, which is not an American cuisine, but it is a regional cuisine, right?
Regional food.
So we can get them everywhere now, but.
I think the cuisine that I would love to explore, know more of is the cooking of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Partly because now I can understand Cajun speak, since I now know enough French to realize that actually they're speaking French, and because I'm from Louisiana and my family's from Louisiana, so there's a kind of heartland that I should probably be discovering and discovering some dark aspect of my identity.
That's, I mean, in that cuisine where we adore New Orleans, have been so many times, and the history there is, it reminded me of aspects of when you were walking through Lyon and describe, you know, this is 16th century and this is post-war and this is pre-war and this is where the bourgeois came in with the industrial, and it's all around you.
Yeah.
And then the restaurants that you were standing in, and I would, you know, maybe just, I don't know, buzz out and faint to be standing in the Mère Brasier because of what it means within food history, or be in the pyramid.
Be in the kitchen. In the kitchen,
Yeah.
the kitchen was basically her kitchen. I mean, you look at the photographs, it was an unchanged kitchen. And like where you did the, you know, the grand manger, that was, you know, it was like a laundry room or something like that in the original house. And that was where she did, it was all completely inefficient and was what was there and was wonderful.
But you would never change it. It would be like knocking down a sacred structure or something. You would never change a single thing.
Actually, they have been, but that's okay.
Uncovered.
Okay.
Yeah, they did uncover a lot of things. They uncovered old tiles and old wall paintings and things like that. But he acquired the property next door and he knocked the wall through, and it was horrifying to see. But he made, yeah, he's very respectful. He's very respectful. He's Maître Vianney, when we saw him last at the restaurant, had really accepted the legacy of La Mère Brasier and her. And when we were there, he was trying to find his own identity within this bigger identity, and he just gave up. And he just thought, she's flowing through me, and we keep her here, and I'm doing her dishes, but I'm doing them a little differently. And as a result, the restaurant is now just, boom, exploded.
I'm so glad to hear that he took that path, and that they're doing well enough to pay the bills and endure. And how are this?
You know, just as an example, like when I was there, we had these very masculine, urban, modern menus, which are gray and white and brown, and now the Mère Brasier is all over the menus. The menus are garish red and cartoons, and it's like, woo, give me another drink.
This to sort of follow up on that, how have your friends, Daniel asks, how have your friends and chefs in Lyon responded to your thesis crediting the start of French cuisine to Italians?
They can't read.
Well, they can't read English, so far so good, and probably in many respects.
They hated it.
Yeah, a lot of people hated it at the time.
Yeah.
The person who was interested at the very beginning was Daniel Ballou. He said, "Oh yeah, the Italian bankers. Yeah, no, I see that.
Yeah.
And Christophe.
Well, I could see that from
Christophe, our neighbor, he did come around. There's the book's going to be published in French next year, and that will be interesting. So far, the only person I know in France who's read it was Churn, who worked with me in the Brasier. Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan, yeah, exactly.
Jackie Chan, and he was enjoying it, and because he and I went through the same thing, and now I'm a guy who took a long time writing a book, and since then he's become a guy running a really good restaurant in the middle of Burgundy.
In Burgundy, right? Yeah. I adore how near the end of the book you do, like, this is where they are now.
Yeah, and they're all big places. I mean,
where are they all now, if you've caught up or kept up with anyone during this global pandemic, where the crummy bodega or the middling pizza place and the grand restaurant are all affected equally in this?
We haven't kept up with many, partly because we sort of know what's happened, except we've been in touch with our friends at Bouchon de Fille.
They opened a new place.
Who opened a bistro, and they all got COVID and they all got sick.
Oh.
But they're opening up gradually, and they definitely give you I mean, in Lyon, they were much more rigorous than they were here. You weren't allowed to go, what was it, like half a mile, a meter, a kilometer from your home, unless you had a doctor's letter, and you were stopped by the police, and the quarantine was very, very serious. And now it's actually, I just read yesterday in the Figaro, it's now coming back again. So we will see what happens. But
Yeah.
I mean, they've gone through the same things that we all. They're a little bit more in advance of us because they control it faster. But the last we were in touch, they were in business and they were opening up. It was wonderful to see them, and they still wanted to know why we didn't visit them last summer. And it was inconceivable that we would have crossed the Atlantic and gone to Italy and not seen them.
They sound like grandmothers. They're all grandmothers. Like, well, but why don't you call?
Nah, they're much more ferocious than grandmothers. They're kind of like fascists. You know, fascists with a heart.
You mentioned
You know, what their demand is like, we give you our love. Well, you know, give us some love back. This is important. You know, we have you over to dinner. You've been over. You know, we've been to your house for dinner. That's love. So come on, honor your obligation.
Sure. It's not unconditional.
No, it's not at all.
I have to. You mentioned Danielle, and it sounds like Jessica is cooking off camera, which is wonderful.
She indeed.
Yeah, someone.
She cooks meals that are on time.
One of these folks on Zoom, Mike, said to everyone that you're cooking with Danielle, your New Yorker piece, which I adored as well. He said that was his entry point into cooking. And he's currently, this is in quotes, he's currently prepping head cheese right now.
Wow.
So, you know,
Nice.
yeah, his kitchen didn't slow down for this interview either. But it wouldn't surprise me that Danielle would understand or be interested in that Italian-French history, just as in that New Yorker piece, he was so interested in how this French chef cooking for Russians, you know,
Yes.
figured out how to pull this dish, get the egg and the salmon and the kasha across the finish.
Which is a Russian dish that got brought over by the French. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But they're also, I mean, at one point his father was remembering farming with his uncles. So this is going back way when he was just a kid. And he remembers the patois, and he remembers the words. And he now knows from reading the Progrès that those words were Italian. And they're at a spot there in the east of France where, you know, the connection to Italy is much more porous and fluid than it is for how we think about it. And it wouldn't be surprising to them that Italian cooking would have an influence, especially when Italian cooking was important. It's you're much closer to Italy than the borders would make you think.
Right.
To Piemonte especially, but
northern Italy. Yeah. Well, we've got just maybe time for a few more questions. So one of the others from Elizabeth is, I'm sorry, not from Elizabeth, but from Bert, excuse me. What does earning some expertise in French cuisine do for your experience of United States or US food? And he means authentic food, not fast food, you know, that sort of thing, but US food. Now that you've had this deep inculcation into French food, and I don't think anyone writers, journalists, has done what you've done. I know there's that wonderful part in the book where one of Danielle's chefs calls or emails over and he says, everyone here thinks what you're doing is so badass. Because no one's ever done it.
Because Danielle's assistant repeating Danielle.
Yeah.
At that time, it all seemed easy because that's when I was going to the Institut Bocuse, and I thought, no, it's very nice, actually. But that did get ugly. Any chance more Riesling?
Yeah, just sorry.
French cooking is just different. It doesn't really impinge on one's appreciation for regional American cooking, except that, I mean, the more, say again?
You admire precision.
Yeah, I learned to admire precision. And if you have the precision in the cooking, then I admire it. But if you don't have the precision in the cooking, then it's a different kind of food. But the precision in the cooking is you learn that. I mean, it was a very important observation that Dan Barber made to me very early on, which is that you can tell in the kitchen if someone is French trained. You've got a new cook in the kitchen, according to how he or she puts down their cutting board and starts to use it. And I was so fascinated by that. You could tell from the cutting board that they are not French trained, or they are French trained. And I did come to appreciate it finally. It's because there's reasons, because you don't put anything in your cutting board that comes from the earth. You don't put anything in your cutting board that you wouldn't feed directly to one of your diners, and you have a whole respect and relationship to it, and you keep it clean, and you arrange it. It was a whole philosophy of how you do your cutting board. And in that philosophy is the French approach, but that doesn't mean, not everybody goes through that, and that's fine. But what you appreciate is when someone is French trained, and you can tell that immediately.
You had you brought up Barber, and he was sort of a this in again, out again, but almost silent diva that was sort of guiding your path in these poignant moments of the book. And you had such a great encapsulation of how incredibly tough a French kitchen can be. And I'm not going to spoil the story for people that will still read the book, but you showed a side of Dan Barber that now that he's been on Chef's Table and the acclaim that he has, a lot of people don't know. And it was a tender little thing that he shared, really vulnerable thing that he shared.
Beautiful.
But it's so terrific because that's millions of those moments strung together are the strength of this book, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was very heartening. I mean, Jessica, in her capacity as also a fluent Italian speaker, was organizing something for school year abroad in Italy, and then invited all these people over to be in it, including Dan Barber. And there was just this moment when I was right in the kitchen, and it was a very ugly spot. And I had to fight to get out of the kitchen to attend as Jessica's husband. And there was just a moment with Dan Barber, and he said, "Oh, how's it going?" And I don't think I said anything. It was just all in my face.
Yeah.
He just went, I understand.
Yeah.
And that's when he told me these things, and
Yeah.
it was very intimate and trusting, and he seemed very tender and brave and beautiful, and just a great, courageous figure. It was really, really, really a tender moment.
Yeah.
And there's a thunderstorm.
And there was a thunderstorm.
So we're going to start with chicken, and then we're going to end with Michel Richard.
I see Thomas. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Thomas says, "Hi, Bill." So Thomas Hauk, for those of you that don't know that are on this Zoom, is cooked years ago. Terrific Milwaukee chef. You should all know him in your own right here for that, but you may not know that he cooked alongside Bill or with Bill in Michel Richard's.
More like I cooked alongside him.
Okay. Bill cooked alongside Thomas at Citronelle, one of the finest restaurants America has ever had. One of
I
the
don't want to flatter my abilities at that point, especially.
Yeah, one of the finest restaurants in America at the time and that we've ever had. But Thomas says, "What's your favorite Michel Richard memory?"
Well, the most tender. I mean, a lot of favorite memories because Michel, from the moment he appeared, and the reason why he starts the book, and he's the reason why I go to him, is because he was generous and funny and embracing, and not a formal, stiff, pretentious French guy, but just like nothing but a big heart. And almost every moment in his company and every meal I had with him, and it is true that every meal that he didn't cook was actually universally awful. But every meal I had, every time I was at the table with him, was a wonderful thing. But the saddest or the most moving, and this also was cut from the book, but I was thinking about reviving it in some capacity, was, he opened up in New York, and it was a big event, and we're all looking forward to it. It's finally coming up in New York, but he opened up in a restaurant that was being run by hotel unions, and he couldn't control the cooking, and he couldn't touch the food, and the food wasn't so good. And it got a very bad review, and by Pete Wells, savage review. And I met with Michel Saturday morning after, and we had a late breakfast, 2 bottles of Burgundy.
Well, after a bad review, sometimes that's appropriate.
Totally.
But we stopped at 2, though, I'm pretty sure. But it was really poignant. It was a man who's been juggling things and doing really well, and by fate and accident, I mean, at that point, Citronelle was closed because the hotel was deemed uninhabitable, and that was because it was falling down, which is a very good reason not to inhabit it. Yeah, he is a man recognizing that his journey was now ending, and he knew his wife would be leaving him, which she did. He knew that the money wouldn't be coming in, which it didn't. And he was reflecting on his life and his friends. And I felt very, very close to him. Very grateful to have that moment. And just felt loved by him and loving of him.
Well, this book begins with him jumping in line before you and Jessica on your anniversary.
Bursting in front of Jessica, robustly, not a slim man to be robustly bursting in front of anybody.
On your way back from your anniversary. And the book concludes with an apropos goodbye to Paul Bocuse and Lyon in a greater sense. So I think with that poignant story about Michel Richard, one of the great French chefs that we were allowed to have on this side of the Atlantic, a real gift for our culinary tradition.
Great gift.
I think we should probably, because we've hit our time limit, we sort of wrap this up. But Bill, I'm so delighted to actually have this conversation with you. I love this book. It's very rare that I underline things in a book of this sort, so I can go back and reread them, because I want them to rattle around inside me and never really fade away. Dirt is such a book for me.
Thank you.
He was your closest reader.
Yeah, Jessica says you're the closest reader I've had. So don't go away. It was very privileged, and I'm very happy to see Thomas.
Yeah.
In a rocking chair outside on a porch. I can see that. We're in the wrong place.
Well, thank you to the Alliance Francaise. Thank you to Boswell Books. Thank you to everyone who is available to join the Zoom call. Thank you to Bill Buford for writing this beautiful book. Thank you to Jessica Green for letting this happen, because there was that moment in the book where he sort of proposes the idea and she says, "This is what we're doing." And that is amazing. Your yes bears wonderful fruit, and I'm so grateful that this book is part of the pantheon of food literature and American literature, because I think we're better for it.
Thank you very much, Kyle.
You bet.
Thank you, Aaron, for making this happen, and Chris for hosting us. And Alliance Francaise.
Yeah. Good night, everyone, and go get a good meal.
Good night. Thank you so much, Kyle.